Tell me if this sounds crazy. I just saw a violin appear out of thin air and play a Bach sonata. And that's not the half of it. Right before that, I saw someone cram a milk jug into a metal tube and pull a shoelace out of the other end. Heck, when I sat down to my desk this morning, I saw an anatomically perfect human kidney spun together on a cotton candy wheel. A surgeon used it to perform a successful transplant. You're right. All of these things do sound crazy, but all of them are real. And technology experts are convinced that this is just the beginning. Not just hackers, hobbyists, and overcaffeinated engineering professors, mind you. We're talking some of the biggest players in the big ideas business. They saw the same incredible video demonstrations that I did and decided they just had to get a piece of the action. Amazon.com CEO Jeff Bezos joined an investment group that plowed $10 million of venture capital into this game changer. Google rushed their development team to make a software app for it. Hewlett-Packard cut a deal with one of the two main hardware makers. The Consumer Electronics Association featured it at their 2012 extravaganza in Las Vegas, where it stole the show. The Pirate Bay, the world's most powerful digital copyright cheater, released a manifesto declaring that intellectual property law is now obsolete and predicting the death of the factory as we know it. All because this impossible technology is now not only possible, but affordable. Naturally, there are skeptics. When it comes to truly disruptive ideas that force us to rethink our basic assumptions about everything, there always are. Most reasonable people thought that the light bulb, the radio, the television, and the cell phone would never be commercially successful. When IBM engineers developed the first microchip in 1968, their supervisor scowled and asked them, "But what is it good for?" When the marketing department at the Digital Equipment Corporation realized they could compete with IBM by selling personal computers in 1977, the company's president told them there is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. See, that's the thing about reasonable people. When they imagine the future, they only see the present. The truth of the matter is the world we enjoy today is built on technologies that imagined a new future. Technologies that transformed ordinary people's lives by making them easier and better. And that's exactly what this invention does. Analysts in the know are calling it the next trillion-dollar industry. Right now, only a few forward-thinking investors understand how truly enormous this change will be. But when we're looking at an industry that sustained a mind-blowing 26.2% annual growth rate for more than 20 years, how much longer do you think that can last? Look, I've never been the kind of guy who gets caught up in the next big thing hype. My name is Danny Shaw, and I publish an award-winning financial newsletter called Motley Fool Stock Advisor. Believe me, I've seen a lot of next big things come along in my day. So I don't blame you if you want to look before you leap. Here at The Motley Fool, we don't chase after hype. That's why The Economist calls us an ethical oasis, and why The Washington Post says we provide individual investors with solid information. We look for smart investments that have outstanding long-term growth potential. We think for ourselves, and we think you should too. So it took me a lot of research before I clearly understood how 3D printing was going to change our world in a profound way. More than anything, it was one conversation that changed my mind. That's why I urge you to take the next few minutes to watch this Motley Fool video report. In plain language, I'll break down the incredible technology that will transform everything about our economy. From manufacturing, to transportation, to healthcare, to defense, to education, to you name it. You'll learn about the 3 visionary companies that are destroying the S&P 500 and the one man who knows exactly when and how to invest in them. He's up huge since making his first investment in this technology in 2008. He made another big gain with his second 3D printing investment in 2009, and he's already crushing the S&P 500 since adding the third and final piece of this trillion-dollar puzzle in January. He's the one who's convinced me this technology is for real, and that I needed the right plan if I wanted to invest in it. What can I say? I'm a believer now. So I was nodding my head in agreement when I saw the following headline on the newsstand at the airport the other day. It was in Forbes. It said this invention will change absolutely everything it touches. Are you ready to find out what it is? I thought so, and I'd hate to keep you in suspense any longer. It all started in the early 1980s at a small laboratory in Southern California's Canyon Country. That was right around the time that Hewlett-Packard and Epson were marketing the first commercially successful desktop printers. This bold advertisement in Compute magazine predicted that printers would become an $11.84 billion market by 1985. The estimate turned out to be too conservative. But skeptics at the time said no office would ever buy its own printer. Then they said that it made no sense to put one on an employee's desk. Then they said that nobody would want one in their home, that color printing would never work, or photo printing. But think about how much desktop printing has changed our working lives. Do you remember mimeographs, carbon paper, secretaries? Meanwhile, at that lab in the sun-kissed Santa Clarita Valley, researchers were already laying the groundwork for the next revolution. What was it? If you think about it, a printer is really just a nozzle that moves from side to side, spitting out or pressing ink onto a two-dimensional surface, a piece of paper. It's not really the ink or the paper that matters, but the precision of the device and the computer program that guides it to lay down the desired pattern. That same computer software also powers more advanced two-dimensional printing technologies like laser printers. And if we can print in 2 dimensions, there's no scientific reason why we can't also print in 3 dimensions. Yes, there are 3D printers. You're watching one in action. And just like 2D printing did, 3D printing is exceeding expectations by rapidly becoming both cheaper and better. Machines that cost more than $100,000 a decade ago are now selling for $12.99, and they can now print with more than 99 different materials. Not just high-quality plastics, many of which are completely recyclable like milk jugs or biodegradable, but also some of the most durable and useful physical materials we use in the analog world, like wood, glass, rubber, steel, and concrete. Some printers can even handle biological materials like human kidney cells, or composites of more than 2 materials that create special properties like heat resistance. Some can make 3-dimensional objects from ordinary printer paper and even chocolate. Just like the market for 2D printers in 1981, the market for 3D printers in 2011 was just over $1 billion. Imagine how big it could become by 2015 and how much you could profit. Still, you might ask, who would want to print in 3D? How about an architect building a model, or a product designer making a prototype, or a dentist casting a mold? These are some of the professionals who are already gaining a competitive edge by using 3D printing technology. One dentist in Belgium even fabricated an entire titanium jaw and successfully implanted it in an 83-year-old patient. He says there are no limits to what 3D printing can do in the medical field. We can replicate bones and even make them stronger than the original. It's like the $6 Million Man. I know. As soon as I heard 3D, I thought it was just a gimmick. I remember those ridiculous blue and red glasses we wore at the drive-ins in the 1970s. I remember when everyone was talking about virtual reality in the 1990s. And I've heard all of the hype about today's 3D movies and 3D televisions. Personally, they just make me dizzy. But when it comes to printing, 3D actually makes sense. In fact, it makes more sense than 2D printing does. I'm being completely serious. Think about it. Do we really need to print paper documents anymore? We can scan and email anything. I suppose we'll always physically sign and stamp our most important documents like college diplomas and property deeds. Even so, our world just isn't made of paper anymore. And really, it never was. Our world is made of physical objects with 3-dimensional resolution. But right now, the way we create, manipulate, and transport those objects is just as primitive as dispatching a messenger on horseback with a scroll and a wax seal. And that's all about to change. Scientists at Drexel University in Philadelphia are using 3D technology to create exact scale model replicas of ancient dinosaur bones, a breakthrough that was never possible before. Another group of researchers is making shells for homeless hermit crabs. They like the printed shells even better than the real thing. Of course, paleontologists and hermit crabs don't pay big money for their 3D printing needs. But guess who does? The United States Air Force. They're using the technology to fabricate sophisticated parts for their new F-35 fighter jets. The process allows them to make complex structures that were previously impossible to manufacture. Rolls-Royce is using 3D printers too, and better precision is just one of many advantages that 3D printing fabrication holds over the traditional manufacturing process. It's faster. With 3D printing, the delay between design and fabrication is now a few hours instead of a few weeks. Motorcycle maker Ducati cut 20 months, or 70%, off its usual development time for a new racing engine. It's cheaper. Companies that use 3D printing don't need to tie up capital investing in expensive tools and dies. They can also eliminate shipping costs. A small supplier to Nike called Union Footwear got a leg up on its bigger competitors by faxing its design bid in 3D. It encourages innovation. By eliminating the delays and costs created by traditional manufacturability constraints, 3D printers allow designers to change their minds and implement a new idea at any time. An Ohio company that supplies crash test dummies to automakers is using the technology to produce new shapes and sizes that respond to client needs that can evolve by the day. It's less wasteful. Traditional manufacturing is subtractive, discarding up to 90% of the initial blocks of raw material. 3D printing is an additive process that builds objects from the ground up, layer by layer. One architect is even using it to make entire buildings. It's more durable. Designers can tweak these additive printers to produce denser but lighter layers of material than would usually be possible. That's why the Smithsonian is using 3D printers to digitize their entire collection. The statue of Thomas Jefferson you see in the National Museum of American History is actually a 3D replica of the original brass statue. It's customer-friendly. 3D printing allows for a level of product customization and personalization that has never before been possible. Shoppers are already ordering lamps, jewelry, sunglasses, and even bikini swimsuits, all made to their exact specifications. I know I won't miss having to try on shoes at the mall. Karl Marx said the problem with capitalism is that it makes everything solid melt into air. I think we all know the problem with Karl Marx, but it turns out he was right about this one thing. Actually, his statement doesn't go far enough. With three-dimensional printing, there is no longer any important difference between a computerized design that exists in the cloud and a real physical thing. If you remember the old Star Trek shows, which take place in the distant future of the 23rd century, a device that could print physical objects from a computerized design was called a replicator. Incredibly, this science fiction is now fact. And here's how smart 21st century capitalists like you and me can take this real-world replicator straight to the bank. While everyone else will be left behind, wondering how they missed out on something that makes so much sense. If a physical object is a software code, then there are no longer economies of scale in manufacturing. In other words, it won't make sense anymore to pay Chinese factory workers to make 100 million duplicates of the same product. Better to pay American designers to make 10,000 different products specifically tailored to individual customers, in the exact size and style they want to buy. Products they can receive in the mail or print out at Home Depot, FedEx office, Walmart, or whichever retailers are smart enough to embrace this technology first. If a physical object is a software code, then everyone from an aerospace engineer to an ice sculptor is really a computer programmer creating digital designs, and the market for those designs will be just like today's market for music, movies, and books. You'll have the iTunes Store, Amazon.com, and other legitimate download vendors on one side of the law and 1,000 fugitive pirate bays on the other. Your grandchild's Happy Meal toy will be scanned onto your smartphone at the cash register and will be finished printing before you get home from the drive-thru. Finally, if a physical object is a software code, then the companies that make the best design software and the companies that can offer a comprehensive package of hardware, input materials, and servicing stand to make hundreds of billions of dollars, just like Hewlett-Packard, Epson, and Canon have made on 2D printers. And here's how. What did you pay for the desktop printer you own now? Probably not all that much. Okay, now here's a better question. What did you pay for the ink cartridges? And how much money does your company pay in servicing costs for its main printer hub? This is what economists call a razor and blade model. Sell the razor as cheaply as you can, but lock in repeat business from loyal customers who need replacement blades. Right now, 80% of the people buying the raw materials that 3D printers use in the form of cartridges and powders are using them to create and test prototypes. But once 3D printers come to be used mainly for the end stages of production, a research firm called Wohlers that has expertise in this area says it will happen before the end of the decade, then the demand for those blades will increase dramatically. Demand will also skyrocket as the technology becomes more mainstream, just like it did for computers and cell phones. That will push prices down, which in turn will pull demand even higher. The Atlantic explains the process like this. First, companies create and use a very expensive set of technologies. Then, garage tinkerers start to use cheaper, smaller versions of the original technology. They create a culture that makes the technology easier to use, and they give it more users, which drives down its costs. Finally, when it is sufficiently cheap and easy to use, mass market consumers start to buy it. Jay Leno uses a 3D printer in his famous garage to replace out-of-production specialty parts for his classic cars. He's one of those early adopters who are helping prepare the technology for the mainstream and creating a historic growth opportunity for smart investors. Because right now we're at the very beginning of the transition from the garage stage to the mass market stage. And that's the moment when you want to be investing. Sure, you could make some money later. You could wait until the market is more proven. But as we've now seen, this technology is already scientifically sound. And it's already used by professionals in every imaginable field of human enterprise. You'd really be waiting for other investors to catch on, because when the big money on Wall Street finally embraces 3D printing, the growth in this industry is going to be massive. Did you invest in Apple in 1980? Did you invest in Microsoft in 1986? If so, you're probably reading this on your yacht, sipping a $150 glass of champagne. If not, this could be your second chance, and I've heard comparisons that are even more exciting. Three-dimensional printing may have as profound an impact on the world as the coming of the factory did. Just as nobody could have predicted the impact of the steam engine in 1750, or the printing press in 1450, or the transistor in 1950, this technology is coming, and it is likely to disrupt every field it touches. It gets better. The person who just compared the 3D printer to Gutenberg's revolutionary printing press isn't a wild-eyed blogger living in his parents' basement, or an excitable housewife who saw the detectives on CSI using a 3D printer to make a model of a crime scene bullet. He's a writer for The Economist, the thinking businessman's favorite sleeping pill. His 3D printing article was the cover story, and The Economist isn't the only traditionally sober publication doing backflips over the incredible potential of this industry. It seems like everywhere I look these days, I see an article about 3D printing. The problem is, none of these articles have compelling, easy-to-use advice for the individual investor who wants to put money into this industry now, but isn't sure which companies to invest in. That's why when it comes to my own money, I rely on David Gardner. He was one of the first high-profile investment advisors to understand the tremendous potential of 3D printing. That was back in 2008, when nobody in the news media was talking about it, and when most of the companies in the industry weren't even showing a profit yet. In the years since, David has identified 3 companies in the 3D printing industry that he calls top dogs and first movers. Companies positioned to dominate over the next 10 years because they have the 6 key traits that signal explosive growth. It's the same method that made David a legend in the investment business. CNN's Money.com website calls him one of the most widely followed stock pickers in the world. He's delivered mind-bending returns even in the worst economy since the Great Depression. But he also built his world-famous reputation by sticking up for the little guy. Individual investors like you and me who need sound advice to navigate a financial system that's rigged to benefit insiders. In 2009, David Gardner recommended a small French company called Dassault Systems. In fact, this company was so obscure that it wasn't even trading on one of the major U.S. stock exchanges. Even now, it's considered a pink sheet stock, which means that it's too small for Wall Street to give it the time of day. Don't worry, Buying this stock through an online brokerage like Fidelity, Ameritrade, E-Trade, or Charles Schwab is easy. Finding anyone who's heard of it probably isn't. And good luck explaining that funny accent mark. Dassault Systèmes makes high-end software for engineers and designers. What do I mean by high-end? Boeing uses Dassault Systèmes software to create 20,000 parts for its planes, including the new 787 Dreamliner. And the guy who designed the iPod for Steve Jobs is giving the keynote address at Dassault's trade show in San Diego. The bulletproof credibility that comes with having major league users and fans like those means this company, which makes the best computer-aided design, or CAD, software in the world, is also the first piece of your 3D investment puzzle. Keep watching and I'll show you how to make life-changing investment returns by applying the razor and blade test to the market for 3D printer hardware, supplies, and servicing. But right now, ask yourself this: what about the shaving cream? When it comes to manufacturing anything these days, that's exactly what CAD software is. Good luck trying to use the razor without it. That's why Jaguar, Land Rover, and Tesla all use Dassault Systèmes CAD software to perform simulations for their new vehicle designs, and why Fender uses it to create their guitars. Dassault also has a strong foothold in the education market. Its 100,000 current customers include 64 universities and schools. In fact, the company even created a popular software program that teaches students how to design race cars and robots with Legos. First, they model them online. Then they build them with the bricks. And imagine how this kind of hands-on next-generation science education is going to take off when teachers can create fully customized parts and design with the 3D printers I'll tell you more about in a minute. The other great thing about this company is that CAD is already a mature, multi-billion-dollar industry. So unlike most pink sheet stocks, Dassault Systèmes has a rock-solid business model and real revenues. It made $2.3 billion over the past 12 months, and 16% of that money is pure profit. Profit they're plowing back into the business so that Dassault Systèmes is well positioned for the tipping point that's coming any day now in the 3D manufacturing industry. In fact, I'd argue that the main reason this company isn't listed on the New York Stock Exchange is that its managers would rather spend their time perfecting the software that runs the 21st century printing press, instead of filling out the endless paperwork that the SEC requires from foreign companies. BMW and Nestle took the same route to entering the American capital markets. That's why now is the perfect time to get on board, before CAD explodes again with the coming 3D manufacturing revolution, and before Dassault Systèmes moves off the pink sheets and onto every investor shopping list. How will your grandchildren remember you? I think about this all the time, and I don't even have any yet. I want to be the one who teaches my grandchildren how to throw a curveball, how to squirt milk through their noses, how to recognize the song that a bluebird sings on the first day of spring. But more than anything, I want them to go to a great college and start their working lives with the kind of wise choices they can only make if they aren't being crushed by debt. And really, to be honest, I want them to know that I did everything in my power to make that possible for them. That means more to me than anything I could do with a blank check for my own sunset years. Although I've always wanted to go on a safari and to play golf at Pebble Beach, and we all want to leave a legacy of great investment returns for our families. But the right opportunity might come along once in a lifetime. And even when it does, you have to know how to take advantage. That's why I'm so proud of the work that David Gardner and his brother Tom do in Motley Fool Stock Advisor. And that's why at the end of this video report, after we put together the last two pieces of the 3D investing puzzle, I'm going to try to sell it to you. I'm not really supposed to say that, but I'd rather not beat around the bush. Here's the way I look at it. Anyone can have a lucky guess, maybe even 2 or 3 lucky guesses. But Dassault Systèmes is just one of dozens of high flyers that David Gardner has recommended to members of Motley Fool Stock Advisor. Recommendations those Stock Advisor members have used to make huge investment gains that have helped them transform their lives. Members like Sarah R. from Sherwood, Arkansas, who says, "Stock Advisor is wonderful. Thanks to you guys, I'm managing my own portfolio, and I do not lose sleep over it." And Philip R. from Anchorage, Alaska, who wrote to tell us there are a few must-haves in life. They are 1. Air, 2. Food and drink, 3. Clothing, 4. Shelter, and 5. Motley Fool Stock Advisor. Everything else is optional. The reason David Gardner's track record for Stock Advisor is so reliable is that, unlike all the acrobats, lion tamers, and clowns who perform in the three-ring circus that is called the financial news and advisory industry, David picks great companies. Great companies, not great bubbles. Because truly timing the market, picking a stock on exactly the right day, the right week, or even the right month is impossible. Nobody in the circus admits this, but it's true. Good investments are made for the long term. I don't mean 100 years. 5 is plenty. 10 is even better. You see, it doesn't take much to be a long term when we're talking about Wall Street. The trading computers that Goldman Sachs and the other big banks use to move most of the world's money around change their mind every nanosecond. All because some other trading computer changed its mind. I have no idea how any of that works, and I suspect they don't either. It gives me a headache and a stomachache just thinking about it. But the good news is, none of it really matters. What does matter is understanding the long-term, big-picture historical trends that really impact our lives, like 3D printing. And strangely enough, that means making great investments is easy. You just need some sound guidance to point you to where the best long-term opportunities are, some spare cash, and the mental discipline to turn off all the nonstop 24-hour noise from the financial media. I'll give you an example. David Gardner recommended AOL in the summer of 1994. I doubt I need to explain to you that the internet was a big-picture historical trend. The stock had already quadrupled in the 12 months leading up to that moment. Sounds like pretty bad timing. I'm sure he wishes he had picked AOL 12 months earlier, but nobody's perfect. He was probably happy enough when the stock he picked too late grew 100 times bigger in the next 6 years. AOL made David Gardner famous, but these days David hates it when I bring up AOL, or eBay, Starbucks, Amazon.com, or the other great companies he discovered in the 1990s. He doesn't want everyone to think he's a one-hit wonder or that his best days are behind him. And he wants investors to understand that it's the strategy behind those picks that really matters. It's a simple strategy he's repeated many times over for investment gains that left the stock market in the dust. In fact, a randomly selected stock portfolio taken from any of the 150 picks that David Gardner published from January 2003 to January 2012 beat the total returns of the S&P 500 an astounding 98.8% of the time. It produced a positive return 100% of the time. And 70.8% of the time, it doubled the S&P 500. How do we know? We tested it 10,000 times. And again, that is a completely random selection, no cherry picking of any kind whatsoever. Could you put together an even better portfolio for yourself with just a few hours of research into David Gardner's picks? Of course you could. Tell me if this sounds crazy.